My name is Steve Hernandez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Legislature's Nonpartisan Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. We are here today to conduct a meeting of our statewide collaborative on school climate and social and emotional learning. I would like to welcome each of you to today's meeting. Today, we have a special opportunity to really memorialize some of our thinking around resources that are potentially coming to the state, that are coming to the state, in fact, and how it is that we might be able to target those resources both immediately and in the long term on some of the work that we are doing around social and emotional skills building and also trauma-informed and other supports that we're considering in the state. So I'd like to also welcome my tri-chair, one of my tri-chairs, Glenn Peterson, representing the State Department of Education. Welcome, Glenn.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I hope you're all doing well.
Thank you, Glenn. And without anything further, I'd like to start by recognizing each of you with any statements that you might like to make. I know Faith, I have you in line first, so I'd like to welcome Faith Voss Winkel from the Office of the Child Advocate. Welcome, Faith.
Hi, thank you, Steve. I just wanted to alert the collaborative for folks who may not have seen a report that the Office of the Child Advocate released regarding Stonington Public Schools and issues related to adult sexual misconduct. I'm happy to send it to anybody or send it to Steve, and he can certainly circulate it. I think there are a couple of important recommendations in the report that I think directly speak to the work of the collaborative. I think if perhaps at the next collaborative, depending on the agenda, I think the Child Advocate would like to come and do a brief presentation on the report and the recommendations if people would welcome that. So that's all I just wanted to say.
Thank you, Faith.
In 35 seconds going over a 52-page report, I think we'd just like to, A, make sure it's on your radar, B, I think the Child Advocate would like to come and just share it, and that there are a number of recommendations that emanated from the investigative report.
Thank you, Faith. I know that we would love to have the Child Advocate give a presentation before the collaborative. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for the work you're doing. Next, we have Eileen Melody. Eileen, I know you have to leave at 11, so please, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here. Each month, I always feel like this is such a wonderful experience to work with you all. I can't speak enough about the kind of work that I do and the importance of the work that I do. Not just me alone, but my colleagues, the school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, and providing support to students on a regular basis. And I feel like this is something that we need to continue to bolster in our schools, the staff to supply that kind of support to students. It's integral within their day. I do daily check-ins with students, checking in the morning, checking out to see that they have all of their actual things, but also that they're together emotionally to be able to function during the school day. I'm running programs, lunch groups, where students can interact with one another and provide support. I'm consulting with teachers and providing them with some tools to help them be more effective in managing and knowing how to cope with students' social and emotional challenges. I feel like it's just very important that we keep that in the forefront, that staff that I represent are integral and to continue to fund those kinds of those roles. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Eileen. And thank you. I know that you and your colleagues are, as was said earlier, on the front line of a lot of this important work. And really, from an asset base, you are an asset to our young people and to other adults as we transition back into being closer together for longer periods of time. So thank you, Eileen. Joanne,
Eileen, it's so nice to see your face. I know you've been back at school and we've only seen a mask. It's like, yes, we're coming out the other end.
I love it. We still wear masks, but I'm in my office by myself, so I can take the mask off. But in the hallways, everyone's still masking up.
Thank you, Eileen. Next, we have Andrew Feinstein. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Eileen and I were talking before we started, it seems to me that one very big issue we need to deal with is the start of next year's school, which will be the first opportunity, to be back to a whole group environment after a year and 3 months of some strange form of either distance or hybrid or not full classes or separation or something like that. And I think we really got to be thinking about what we need to do next September to smooth the transition back to the old form of school, if that's indeed what happens, and not just assume that it's going to be like another first day of school. It's not. It's going to be quite different, I think.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to come back to that point about the opportunities in the fall. But first, Ann Freiberg, I see that your hand is up. If you could unmute.
Thank you. I know that in your email that came yesterday or the day before, you asked about resources and where those should be put and so on. And so I just wanted to say a few words about, I think that it's so key, and it's moving off of what Andrew said and certainly Eileen, and thinking about a new normal. I hope we don't go back. I hope we have many lessons learned, and I hope we think about what the most glaring lesson from my perspective is that kids need community. They need relationship. And it's all well and good to add more social workers and counselors. And please understand, I'm not in any way minimizing the need for them. But I think that where the biggest bang for our buck, both short-term and long-term, is in the regular classroom. And we all know, if I were to ask the administrators here to think about those teachers, counselors, social workers, custodians for that matter, who naturally build relationships and community very well, those are also, it's a one-to-one correspondence, the environments that have the highest academics or success. And I think that what we should be learning is that has to be the theory of action for mitigating learning losses. I'm starting to hear, and it's troubling to me, that where we were talking almost exclusively about social emotional, and I'm going to say growth, because I think that's what we're looking for, is social emotional growth in all kinds of strategies and skills and so on. But now we're hearing much more about learning losses. And it would be a crying shame to go back to what we experienced pre-COVID, where we thought the best learning gains would be achieved by increasing instructional time. And that is tragic. That's where we've gotten ourselves. And if anybody's learned anything, the overall point, I mean, kids can go, and Eileen, you can check in with them, your colleagues can check in with them, but at the end of the day, they go back to their classrooms. And teachers need the tools and the permission to lead with relationships, lead with community, create what I'm going to call a restorative environments. And the reason I say that is that the description of a restorative environment is very, very high expectations, but support, individualized, differentiated support, so that those in them can meet them. And then when there are problems, and I always like to say bad behavior is behavior asking for help, we teach skills, we support them, we start to think differently, because we're still, I see the convergence of three critical things. One is equity, one is trauma, and the other one is learning losses. And the only convergence that is going to achieve the right movement forward is to start looking at the environments and how we are correcting misbehavior and supporting children who are struggling. So I certainly could go on and on about what kinds of professional development or what kind of supports teachers would need. But I think it would be just so tragic if we go back to attempting to mitigate whatever losses there are without focusing and leading with relationship building.
Thank you, Joanne. And I love that interconnectedness that you are describing, because whether it's in program, in policy making, we are really taking advantage of what we've learned about that interconnectedness and the need for person-centered attention, whether the person be the child or the person be the adult in the school environment. Next, we have Representative Robin Comey. Hi, Representative.
Hi, how is everyone? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. I'm in the car heading to Hartford, but I didn't want to miss this meeting. I've been not able to tune in as much as I've wanted to. I don't even know if this is quite the correct sort of meeting to bring this up in, but I just wanted to put something, since we're talking about some of the funding coming in, to talk about something that I keep hearing from my community, and I was glad to hear her community mentioned as well as schools, is the needs of our special ed kids, our kids with our IEPs, our kids with autism, that have had incredibly, I guess I would say, unique experiences with the pandemic. Maybe some have made some really, discoveries on learning styles that worked for them. I'm hearing success stories, and I hear the struggles as well. But I guess, the community, the integration of those of the kids into our community seems to be a gap that I would love to see filled. And I've been trying to speak with some of the summer programs to see if they can provide services and programs for kids, but also be able to provide one-on-ones and things like that to give them the extra support they need in these community events to make them feel to allow them to participate just like the mainstream kids. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that. I've been hearing that not only in my community but from other legislators, and would love to. I know you guys are a large group with a lot of different resources and involved in a lot of different programs and parts of the state, and I just wanted to bring that up so that you guys are aware of what I'm hearing on the ground. Thank you. I look forward to listening in.
Thank you, Representative Comey. And I do know that you and other members of the legislature are working really diligently in the next couple of weeks to revive some of those individualized approaches that really target not only children with special needs, but the special needs that I think a lot of our kids are experiencing, but also exploiting some of those opportunities that you described, Representative Comey, of working with community to really keep some of those things that we may have learned that work. So I really appreciate that the legislature is in a moment right now where you are going to be pushing some of these supports through the finish line. And just know that the members of the collaborative here are here to help you in that effort. And please rely on us. Next, I have Ray Rossomando.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you. I just wanted to echo the comments of Ann Freiberg. I think she hit the nail on the head. There is quite a focus on what they call learning loss, and we kind of call it, learning recovery. The learning loss aspect seems to focus on tested subjects, math and science, and really, we really need to get back into the schools, build relationships, and help kids find their interests and to restore their socialization and to have the building blocks of social emotional support. So whether we're talking about summer or after school enrichment, starting school year next year, recognizing the unique challenges, we need to focus not so much on the academics associated with learning loss, but the necessary conditions for learning recovery. So we're on the same board on everything around there. I did want to raise two other issues that we will be asking for. I mean, you have $1.1 billion coming in the ARP funds alone, and a total of about $1.5 million when you look at ESSER over the course of the three federal acts. if anybody was on the SDE and DPH call this morning, you would have heard about masking outdoors and versus indoors, the changing temperatures, but then the persistent issue of are the conditions in the school conducive to learning when it's hot, when it's damp, when it's humid. And so one thing we're actually advocating for is taking these funds, which, because they're going to be somewhat one time, and invest in the air quality of our schools, help them become 24/7, 365 schools by addressing old, outdated air control systems, HVAC systems, installing new ones if possible. Vermont did this using all three of the federal coronavirus aid acts, and they established a statewide program, and they're funding it with the funds from ESSER as well. And given the level of funding, this is something that we can do and set up our schools in the future in a way that we can use them on an ongoing basis. I think it's an important thing to look at, because we do know that the conditions in the school, asthma rates and disproportionality of asthma rates, all related to indoor air quality, and then certainly the conditions for the spread of germs and future pandemics if that were to occur when the HVAC systems aren't maintained or modern. So that's something we're looking at. And then lastly, we scrambled. We did a heck of a job trying to build the plane while we're flying with respect to remote instruction. But now we've learned a lot, and in the isolated need for remote instruction going forward, I think it's important that we hire and train dedicated staff to provide the remote instruction, and try to end this practice of dual or double teaching, where you have a teacher simultaneously teaching in-person students as well as students at home, and it just does a disservice to both. Anyone you talk to in the distance learning community says you can't do that. It's just it doesn't make sense. And again, it becomes an equity issue, because the districts that can afford to have staffing for that are the districts that aren't necessarily the ones serving the students with the greatest needs. I think it's an important thing for us to look at. So I don't want to take up too much time, but thanks for letting me just share a little bit of what we're talking about in terms of the use of ESSER funds.
Thank you, Ray. And thank you for describing the importance of the conditions of teaching and learning, both pro-social and environmental, because that opportunity that you're describing to really infuse dollars into the conditions of teaching and learning that have persisted, right, even before pandemic, air quality, everything that you described, the unnatural rates of asthma in certain communities, that's so critically important. So that's really smart. Thank you, Ray. Next we have, let's see who we have here. Fran Rubinowitz. Hi, Fran.
Good morning, everyone, and
Welcome.
I'm very pleased to be here this morning. There's a few things I'd like to address. I hope, certainly academics need to be a part of the summer. I hope we don't approach it, and certainly my discussions with superintendents have not been about learning loss. We really do believe that we need to come from a strength-based model, because frankly, I believe our children, maybe they have lost some content, but frankly, they've learned a great deal. And I think we need to build on their resilience and on who they are and what they have taken in during this time. I also would say to you that I have not had a conversation in which SEL has not come up in terms of ensuring that the summer school is a time of joy, a time of kids coming back and finding the joy of being together again, as well as teachers. And so I just wanted to assure people, perhaps I'm not seeing the whole picture, but in my discussions with superintendents, that certainly has been the message from them and to them. It has also been the message from Charlene Russell Tucker at the State Department, and she has also repeatedly asked us, what do teachers need this summer? I want them to have whatever it is they need. And we've been brainstorming that. So I wanted you to at least hear that, and hear that we are encouraging in every possible way a partnership with community-based organizations in order for summer school to be, a very different experience this summer. To raise point about improving the air quality, I couldn't agree more. I was in Bridgeport for many, many years. I'm telling you, we had some schools that had horrible air quality, and I had to dismiss school early many times. I'd like that fixed. And I do believe in many of our districts, there are dollars there for that to happen. And it should be a priority. It is about building the capacity of the districts. But I also want you to keep in mind that every district is not getting that kind of funding. Some of the funding in some of the districts is quite small, and they may not be able to move forward with that. To raise third point about remote learning, couldn't agree more. And today, hopefully, we will have a document coming out on that. It's a consensus document that we reached consensus with the CEA, AFT, CAPS, CABE, and CAS, all working together to say, this is what we believe should be guidelines for remote learning for next year. And we've just completed that. Took us a long time, messy work, but the collaboration has been wonderful. And that document will be released to my members at least sometime, either today or early tomorrow. So just want to say I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy as always that we are discussing the pieces that are going to make such a difference for our kids moving forward.
Thank you so much, Fran. And thank you for that breaking news on the release of that important guidance. Please feel free to share with us as well as you see appropriate, so that we can talk about that publicly and share your recommendations publicly as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Stephen. I want you to know I'm always struggling with how, and I work with CEA and AFT and CAS and CABE to try to figure out how to best get the information out there. So, but I will certainly move it on to you.
Thank you, Fran. Appreciate that. Tim. Hi, Tim Marshall. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Tim Marshall, from the Director of Community Mental Health Services. That's out of the DCF mandate for the general mental health mandate we have. I just wanted to remind folks of general prevalence rates for mental health. Before the pandemic, 10% of all kids have a serious mental health struggle, and 20% in your average year has some kind of mental health challenge that needs to bring them to the attention of the formal mental health system. Since the pandemic, we see estimates, the lowest estimates I see is that an increase of up to 40 to 50%. So that means that we're thinking about 20 to 40% of student mental health need of the general population. So I just remind people of that. The second piece that I want to remind is the leading diagnosis historically is depression. That has been outpaced during the pandemic to anxiety. So anxiety now is outpacing, which again, intuitively makes a lot of sense to us. But I just want to suggest and to say, one of the areas that we put forward that we withdrew in our internal COVID relief dollars proposal was for districts to develop a position, specifically something to the effect of a director of student mental health. That is, that a district formalizes a position and the responsibility of paying attention to students and being able to identify formally when a child has a mental health issue, and then be able to track if they've in fact been linked to professional help or some kind of mental health support. So I just reiterate that, and just want to remind folks that we continue to work hard connecting with State Department of Ed and local educational authorities to just be connected to their community-based mental health provider system that we often are very much funding or supporting. So just we'll leave it at that, but appreciate joining the group again this morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. And I know that there are, as I said before, there are several initiatives that are cogent to this body in various pieces of legislation that are making their way through even now. So let's keep an eye open for each other, and please feel free to reach out to each other through this medium so that we can support each other when the time is right. Thank you for that, Tim. Hi, Ann Smith.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning, everyone. I want to make a few observations of what I've heard thus far this morning. And I want to thank you, Tim, for sharing those very sobering statistics around the mental health needs that our students, our young people are experiencing, and that we know they will be bringing into the school setting whenever they return. I also just want to make a comment around the focus that we are having on social emotional learning. And one of the challenges that I see with that is that if you put 6 people in a room and ask them what social emotional learning is, you are likely, maybe you won't get 6 different interpretations, but I think you'll get more difference and variance than you will get uniformity. And that is a concern. There's also a concern about how we are rolling out social emotional learning supports. And I have not been made aware of, and so I could be missing it, but I'm tuned into a lot of things, that we are making sure that social emotional learning, however that is defined or interpreted in a given setting, is working for the variety of students that we have. We do have a tendency to adopt a one-size-fits-all approach to things, and we often then find ourselves with disparate outcomes that are not necessarily unintended, though they always get characterized as being unintended because we're not thinking things through as clearly as we need to with the variety of perspectives that we need to, which leads me to just my next comment, which is I want to thank you, Fran, for sharing what you told us about the document that's going to be coming out. And you really went through a listing of all of the different perspectives that were engaged in the development of that document. One of the perspectives that I don't see when we are creating policy documents at this higher level is the family. Where's the family? The parents, the students who are going to be impacted by those policies. So while it's commendable that it might be circulated through the collaborative and through the membership of those organizations, it's very concerning to me that does not appear to be adequate opportunity for there to be input from family. If family engagement, if dual capacity is truly at the heart, is the framework that Connecticut is using, then we need to make sure that we are implementing that not only at the school level, not only at the district level, but we need to be making sure that dual capacity is evidenced at the policy making tables that are right now developing policies and procedures that will guide our education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you so much, Ann. That is really powerful, and the reminder that school, family, and community is an integrally woven together set of variables that impact the day of the young person. And there's another thing that really strikes me in what you're saying, which is that there's a social and emotional learning side of the conversations that we have in this room. But there's also the social and emotional supports side of the work, right? And that support needs to be tailored, as is the learning, by the way, needs to be tailored so that it's accessible to communities, accessible to different types of communities, and at different levels of need, both for the learning and for the support. So thank you for bringing that up as part of this conversation, Ann, and for lifting up the family, of course. I see in the chat that several of you have been chiming in, and I'm wondering, Ray and Kate, you mentioned earlier, you also and Pat or Pam, I'm sorry, if you'd like to weigh in just in this forum so others can hear and also for the benefit of our viewers.
Sure, I'm just waiting to see if Ray wants to pop in.
Go ahead, Kate.
I had just put into the chat that I had agreed with some earlier comments made by Andrew and Joanne regarding the emphasis on learning loss. And it's my real fear that in the fall, everyone will recognize that mental health supports and social emotional growth are essential to learning. While there'll be a lot of talk and acknowledgement of that, I worry that the pressure placed on kids to catch up academically is going to supersede that. So my perspective at CEA is one of teaching and learning, and so my heart is with those kids that are going to have such a hard time, as I think Andrew mentioned, that transition in the fall is going to be so extraordinarily difficult. And I'm hopeful that some of the money that's now on the table can be used to put in some meaningful supports for kids to ease the next couple of years are just going to be unbelievably difficult for many of them. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Kate. You know, it strikes me, one of the things that I know, one of the elements that are being considered in policy is resourcing assessments, the assessments of where kids are, where the adults may be, and these are mental health screenings included. So Peg, I wonder if you wanna highlight that. I know that you mentioned it in the comments.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everybody for all your hard work during this crazy year. Yeah, I just wanted to underline the point that Tim was making, that we have a lot of kids who have critical need, and we're always aware of the kids that externalize those needs, the ones that are failing classes, having discipline issues, questioning authority. We're aware of them. What we find in districts when we start a thoughtful universal screening process is we start to uncover the kids that internalize their pain, that maybe perform really well in school or even overperform in school, but are quietly in big trouble when it comes to mental health. So I just want to underscore the fact that, in Old Saybrook, that's been happening since 2013. There's districts that are picking up on it. I get requests all the time to do trainings around it because it is a facet of multi-tiered systems of support. So if we can identify kids early, we can do more and help them build in those coping skills that they need. And I see that very aligned with social emotional learning, because having all of those elements in place, self-awareness and self-management and social awareness and relationship skills and decision-making skills, the more intentional we can be about supporting kids in the areas that they need, and doing it earlier is always better. So I just want to underscore that need and mention that there are certainly resources out there, and I'm doing a ton of training about universal screening right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Peg. Hi, Joanne, your reflections?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of things that people have been saying that I think need, well, here's my comments. I agree with Ann wholeheartedly that there is not one definition of social emotional learning. I think we want to see social emotional growth in all the skills that everybody has, but without that kind of clear understanding of what it means, some people, and I'm going to go back to the classroom, see this as lessons. They see it as curriculum. They see it as programs. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to minimize the wonderful curricular lessons that you can locate around any particular social emotional skill, but that's icing on the cake. The environment has to be the great equalizer. And if they're not safe, if they are either too permissive or punitive and so on, kids do shut down. And they whether they get really quiet or they act out. And I just want to punctuate, and I've learned a lot. I'm not smart enough to make anything up. So I just try to read and read and read and synthesize and so on. There's a big difference between mental health, schizophrenia, something like that, and trauma, which is injury. And most of it is internal wounds. And when kids are acting up, very often it looks like ADHD or ODD or EDD, but the interventions are so vastly different. And I think that we have to be very careful that when we're doing mental health screenings, we are simultaneously thinking about trauma screenings because they're not the same. And the interventions are so vastly different, but every single child, adult, everybody is experiencing trauma because of this pandemic, not to mention other kinds of traumatic things that may be going on. And we all need to heal. And healing is different from, some kind of intervention protocol. And I'm not a mental health specialist, so please, Tim and everybody else, you can correct me and tell me I'm out of it. But I really think that what I've learned is the two top interventions for trauma are high quality relationships and safe environment. That's the equalizer. And there's not an individual in a school, I don't care whether that's an administrative assistant, custodian, cafeteria worker, or teacher, that isn't capable of doing that. And I think that should be the top priority. And then we can determine what kind of added programs, lessons, dealing with curricular academic issues, and when we need to back off. But if we don't focus on that, I think that all of the gains that we have learned need to be made will be less than they should be. So thank you for allowing me a moment.
Thank you, Joanne. Hi, Tim.
Yeah, I think I think the mental health professional field might see it slightly different. I think trauma is underlying to and a part of mental health. I think to bifurcate the mental health system in kind of the serious mental health and then everything else, I think is because it's all on a continuum. I think that's a challenge. And I think one of the things in children's mental health, the approach we take is that all children's mental health, hopefully we can correct by adulthood, so that there's also a healing component from that. So whatever the challenges of mental health are, in almost all mental health conditions, many mental health conditions also have underlying traumatic trauma, particularly when it comes to children. I think what ACEs has taught us is the general population walking around has a number of traumas, and I think you kind of shared that. So I agree with you wholehearted with all your statements, but I do think also we try to take a very hopeful and optimistic approach for all children disorders, whatever they may be, and believe that we try really hard to get them on a corrective path. So I just add that to your comments, and to say again, I think in Connecticut, one of the things that we're doing, and we have developed in Connecticut a child trauma screening tool, which has now become a nationwide use. It's a validated instrument, and it is, we have been embedding it across our service array now for a number of years, and it's a very simple tool. So I also applaud and support screening, particularly in the schools where kids are at, for that. I think one of the areas we've realized is we still have to do a much, much better job engaging and educating families, as Ann's point earlier, on how screening for mental health issues and traumatic issues could and should be no different than vision screening or other medical conditions. So it's just one of those things. And getting intervention, identification and intervention as quickly as possible, especially for kids, is hugely, hugely important. So I know that I'm not saying anything earth-shattering to this group, but I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Tim. And thank you for raising up again, to Ann's earlier point, the importance of communicating with the family and really having the family understand what their options are for their kids. You know, we're talking in the chat about consent, and Peg, I wonder if you could help us understand a little better the options that districts may have with parental consent for screening.
Sure. Well, I can also toss the ball to Jan because they're doing this in Old Saybrook and I'm an Old Saybrook parent, but largely we get a letter that states that the screening is going to happen and the parents can opt out. So that's passive consent. The first year we did it was the year right after Sandy Hook, and we had 3 families opt out. I left the district in 2014, but my sense is that most families have now seen it as this is part of what we do to help kids learn because we're trying to remove barriers to learning. So it was discussed as we screen for vision, hearing, scoliosis. We're screening all the time to identify kids who are struggling in literacy and numeracy. So that's really how it's shared with parents, and parents have lots of opportunities to ask questions, information sent home in multiple languages, and parents can take a look at the actual protocol. Active consent means that you send home something like a permission slip or something that is signed, much like the things that you send home in the beginning of the year to have signed for all different types of permissions to be videotaped or whatnot. But again, that's when the parents have to understand, what am I signing and why am I signing it? The Hatch Act, which is a longer conversation, is all about protected confidential information. So if you're asking questions that pertain to, highly sensitive areas of sexuality or, and then there's always the question of if we're asking about suicide. And so there's a lot of delicate pieces to this that require careful planning and certainly consultation with, legal consultants in the district, but when it's done well, it becomes part of the data we have to help us support students. And we can look at that on a student level, we can look at it on a grade level or a whole school level, and it helps us plan for what we need in order to support students in the student support team, where their energy needs to be, even who's on the student support team based on what your data shows. I don't know, Jan, did I leave anything out about active or passive consent that you want to jump in on?
No, not at all. The only thing that I would add is that because the parents know that we'll be consulting with them quickly, especially if there are concerns, I think a level of trust has built over time in the process. And the only other thing I'd add in your explanation of what we do with the information is we are also making district-wide programmatic decisions, especially now when our screeners showed increased level of anxiety, and making academic and socio-emotional programming decisions based on what we've learned. So very helpful to us, and we hope to our families and kids as well.
Thank you. And you always have to think, how is it that we are planting the seeds now so that we can, in the out years, ensure continued equitable access, not only to screening, but also to the resourcing that we may discover a child may need post-screening. So, that's about building capacity. That's about really empowering schools that may have less resources as well. So equitable access on both ends is really critical. So thank you for that. And thank you for what you're doing, Jan. Peg, go ahead.
I just wanted to echo what you're saying, Steve, saying that the relationship that districts have, like the ones Old Saybrook has with their youth and family services, makes it possible to build that capacity and meet the needs of students that come up on the screeners. I know not all districts enjoy that kind of relationship with an outside entity. And I think the other piece is one of the early outcomes was because there was such a high rate of anxiety even prior to the pandemic, parent groups were initiated, and that parent-to-parent support really took off based on those regular meetings that happened, after I left. But certainly I was, made aware that was a really nice outcome of doing the universal screening. And it speaks to the point that several people have made about how do you bring families into it, because I think the support that those parents found about working with or supporting your child with anxiety was one of, was a key outcome of initiating and sustaining a universal screening process in Old Saybrook.
Great, thank you for that. Glenn, I'd love if you were to tell us a little bit more about the DESA, because as you stated in the comments, I think it's important that we know what all of our options are, from the simplest to the more complex. So Glenn, I'd love to hear from you. If you could just unmute.
Yes, and I'm saying thank you as I'm still muted. So thanks, Steve. I'd like to talk about the DESA, but also about the there's been some general talk about the ESSER and ARP and things like that. And I want to say a few things before we leave, and this might be the good spot. As I said in the comments, the DESA is really a very simple, straightforward SEL screener. There are 8 questions that at the K through 8 level, teachers rate students on, and there's parents can rate students on exactly the same 8 questions. But they're very simple things like, has Andrew persisted in a task? That's kind of a straightforward thing that we'd all like to know. Has Stephen said positive things about peers in the last 4 weeks? Those types of things are the questions around the DESA. And I really see it as a screener, just like I think it was Peg mentioning earlier. Like when I was a principal, we did beginning, end of year math and reading assessments. And now that was, of course, at the elementary level, but we wanted to track growth over time, and we want to do exactly the same thing with these the social emotional competencies. Now, at the same time, we meaning folks at the department, are finishing up the grades 4 through 12 components of social, emotional, and intellectual habits. And our planning is to weave these two things together, meaning the thing about the important thing about the DESA isn't the assessment itself, is what it is. It's what it tells us and what we need to do to help support students to improve their social emotional competencies. And I think we have a very clear plan going forward, both about the DESA and about this competencies document. And we're planning to weave them together. So on a completely different subject, can I just see hands for those of you who have your cameras on? Have you received the request from the department relating to stakeholder feedback relating to the ARP ESSER funding? I see Fran did, Steve, I see a few, okay, but I see others that haven't. I'll forward that to all of you because we're specifically asking for written feedback, and it's perfectly fine. I've been taking great notes, and we'll include all of this, I'll type them up and we'll include them. But if you really want to make a statement, and Stephen, that could be for you as for the whole group to answer I think there are 5 questions in it, and it's quite a lengthy document, but it kind of explains what each of the questions are about, and kind of puts it in the federal context. So I'll send that out. Couple more things. Right now, as of the end of April, so this was literally 2.5 weeks ago, 79.3% of students were in full-time school. About just under 20%, just over 20% were in hybrid learning situations, and only 1% of students were fully remote. So we're getting close and closer and closer. And I don't want to say that next September won't be a challenge, because absolutely it will. We absolutely believe that in the importance of both SEL and mental health, but the requirements about learning loss and acceleration were part of the federal requirements to get the ESSER ARP money. And that's part of the reason it's taking a prominent place. We're writing our application right now, And one of the 4 priorities is still SEL and student mental health. So we're completely on board, and I very, very much appreciate all of the comments that folks have made. So, let's continue, and I'll forward that email to all of you as we continue talking.
Thank you, Glenn. And just Andrew, a quick thought from you, and then I do want to leave some time for the child advocate to give a presentation that she has asked to give. So I want to welcome the child advocate, but go ahead, Andrew.
I just want to clarify a couple of things on what Glenn said. Now, I'm not sure that there's a legal requirement for consent, but I think we're making an enormous mistake if we compare a mental health screener to a math or literacy screener, particularly in minority communities where mental health is as sensitive as trigger of an issue as is possible. And I think, for us to sort of brush it off as another screener is really a major mistake, certainly in districts with a lot of minority students. First. Second, the figures that Glenn gave on is what schools have available in terms of in-person and remote and hybrid. It is not figures on percentage of students taking advantage of that. In schools that are full-time in school, there is a substantial proportion, up to 20 or 30% in some districts, who have opted into continued remote learning. So I do think that there is a change. I'm delighted with what the department's doing on stakeholder participation. It's really up to districts, however, to engage in serious stakeholder participation in developing their plans to spend ESSER and ARP money going forward. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead,
if I
Glenn.
jump back in, Steve?
Yep, sure.
No, your points are very well taken, Andrew. And however, I don't think that we can characterize the DESA in any way as a mental health screener. It certainly isn't. I've reviewed the screeners, for example, that Tim was talking about relating to trauma. They're quite different in terms of the type of questions they ask, which might deal with family violence and other much more serious issues than, has Glenn said something kind about a peer in the last 4 weeks. So I think SEL is an important universal underpinning for good mental health because it builds good coping mechanisms and other strengths, but to characterize it as a mental health screener is inaccurate.
Well, thank you for that clarification, Glenn. And Andrew, what's interesting is as we kind of tease out the differences, imagine families and communities having the same questions and really benefiting as well from those clarifications. So let's continue to drill down into that as much as we can.
One more very, very quick point. We have folks from the department and people from Aperture kind of doing the rounds at various organizations. In fact, a woman named Lisa Ann Williams, who's one of the Aperture folks, has been speaking in a number of groups. And I think is it CPAC, Andrew? Okay, I see nods. She's speaking to that group on June 4th or 5th. And so we're trying to do a better job of informing the community. So this, this confusion between kind of SEL screener, mental health screeners, or other higher level or more in-depth assessments, is less confusing to people.
Great, thank you. And I know Sarah, the child advocate, Sarah Egan, is here. I know that they had, she and Faith had to jump off, but just to give a teaser, I know that Faith mentioned at the beginning of the program that the child advocate will be giving a presentation of their findings. We will find time on our agenda, perhaps at our next meeting for that presentation. Another request that we have had for our next meeting, so we'll balance our schedule, but we've been asked by Dr. Mark Brackett at Yale if we can host Drs. Chris Cipriano and Dr. Mike Strambler, who are both professors who are really unpacking SEL and Ruler from an equity lens. And this is important work that they have really undertaken, that Yale has committed to. It's an example of how it is at an institution that has a a series of approaches, both academic and linguistically based approaches for social emotional skills building, really takes on the question of equitable access to the skill set. So they've asked to come and share with us what they are doing, what they've built over the last few years, and we are happy to have them join us next month as well. I'm wondering if there are any parting thoughts as we close this really vibrant conversation. I want to appreciate all of you and appreciate also the moment that we're in, because as I said, Glenn noted some of the department's guidance that will be coming out soon. Andrew and others, and Ann, you noted some of the complexities and some of the important things to consider as we bring in family, community, and school. But also the important policy moments that we're seeing unfolding in the next few days and couple of weeks, both around resources, but also around pronouncements of policy that will help drive how it is that we reintegrate both pro-socially and of course as an asset base, to your point, Fran. So unless there's anything further.
Steve?
Go ahead, Representative McCarty.
Yes, I just wanted to express my gratitude and to listening to everyone's perspectives today. It really helped put in focus all of the important work that is going on. And I thank the collaborative so much for all the work and with your guidance, Steve. And I'll be anxiously waiting the documents that we heard about today. So I just wanted to extend my voice and appreciation to everyone. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Representative McCarty. And I know that the efforts of the Education Committee have really been bipartisan, focused around what's right for young people. And you have all been working really hard, and I want to acknowledge that. And the testament to that is, I think, what we're going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks with your really honing in on issues of social emotional skills building, supports, and growth. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Without anything further, I want to appreciate again all of you and thank you for today's vibrant conversation. For our viewers, we will be broadcasting this conversation. We'll also be providing it to you, Glenn, and thank you for offering to take note of some of the richness that was shared today, and also for sharing the link so that we can continue to provide guidance to the department that you have so thoughtfully asked for us to do. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for the work that you continue to do on behalf of our kids and families. Take care, everybody.